Hello there, lovers of colorful cardboard rectangles. My name is Alex, and today I am going to be showing off my Xyris the Writhing Storm deck tech. This is a deck that lets all of your opponents draw cards. It makes them happy, and then all of a sudden you're slapping them across the face with a bunch of snakes. It's a really fun deck. I hope you like it. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and comment below if you have anything you want to say to me. Thanks for watching, and let's see what I have. Okay, first things first, let's talk about the commander of the deck. It is Xyris, the Writhing Storm. Two colorless, a green, a blue, and a red for a legendary Snake Leviathan. It is a 3/5 with flying. Whenever an opponent draws a card, except for the first one they draw each of their draw steps, create a 1/1 green snake creature token. Whenever Xyris, the Writhing Storm, deals combat damage to a player, you and that player each draw that many cards. Okay, so obviously we're going to be wanting to let our opponents draw a lot of cards. We have wheels in the deck, and when we use them and Xyris is out there, we make a ton of snakes. So this deck abuses the fact that not only do we get to draw cards, but we also, when we let our opponents draw cards, we make a small army. It also is helpful that Xyris itself is a snake. There are some things like Shared Animosity and Coat of Arms in the deck that make it so Xyris not only will be able to do commander damage to kill somebody, but also when you do more damage with Xyris, you and that player draw more cards and you make more snakes. So this card is incredibly strong. We want to make sure it's always out there, and with this deck, we are going to be drawing a ton of cards, we're going to be ramping up, and hopefully we'll just have so much advantage over our opponents that they can't stop us. But you know what? For the beginning of the game, we're just going to be nice. We're going to let everyone draw some cards. We're going to play it a little slower. And then once this thing gets out there, we are running to the finish line. We are going for it. So let's start off with the ramp, and then we'll move on from there. As per usual, let's start off with the ramp for the deck. I'm not going to go over the lands. There will be a list of the deck in the description below. If you want to check out the lands, feel free to do so. But for right now, I'm going to go over the ramp. Ramp-wise, we have some pretty average, nothing special ramp. We have Arcane Signet, Explosive Vegetation, Farseek, Felwar Stone, Growth Spiral, Sky Shroud Claim, Soul Ring, Thought Vessel, and 3 Visits. All of those are pretty average. You will find those in a lot of decks. But we do have some that I think are particularly good in this deck. The first one is Ashnod's Altar. We make a lot of snakes in this deck, and it's nice when you can just turn those snakes into 2 mana. So this card can help you skyrocket X spells and have your opponents draw even more cards to make even more snakes. It's very good. It also prevents people from stealing stuff you don't want them to, as in creatures. So if somebody tries to take your Xyris from you, just sacrifice it. It's better in your command zone than under their control. Next is Cryptolith Rite. This card is very nice, especially if our creatures have haste, because that makes it so all of our little snakes can tap for mana. And I didn't realize this when I put this card in here. It's a mana of any color. Whatever color you want. I thought it was only green. So this card, if you have this out there and a haste enabler, you're going to win the game because of how many cards you draw and all the snakes that you'll be making. And then the last one, it's a super strong card, and if your opponents don't know what it is, they will after you use it. It is Growing Rites of Itlimoc. 2 colorless and a green. You get to look at the top 4 cards of your library and reveal a creature card from among them, put it into your hand, and then the rest on the bottom of your library. That's really nice. Not why it's in the deck, though, because at the beginning of your end step, if you control 4 or more creatures, you transform this thing. And have you ever heard of Gaia's Cradle? This is arguably better because it even taps by itself for a green mana if you don't have any creatures. If this land is allowed to flip and nobody can remove it, you will have way more mana than anyone at the table, and it's going to be easy for you to just stomp over your opponents. This card is super strong, and I promise once you use it once or twice against your opponents, they're gonna all want to remove it, and if they can't, good game. So, between you and me, Xyris is the thing that makes this deck work so well. And there are other cards in the deck that your opponents are going to want to remove because they're horrifying. But without Xyris out there, they become less horrifying. So we need ways of protecting him. He is a big, lovable snake, and we want to keep him out there. We run some counterspells in the deck. Arcane Denial is especially good because it lets your opponents draw cards, and then you get to make snakes from it. Cloud of Dominus gives Xyris haste, and that's nice, because then we can sit on 5 mana, and then when we play our 6th land, we can put Xyris out there and then equip it with Cloud of Dominus, so we don't have to wait one turn around the table to see if someone removes it. Then it has haste, and then guess what? It gets +2/+2. That's more damage and more snakes that you're making. Shroud is the reason this card is in the deck. We want to make sure he stays alive. Counterspell is a counterspell. Darksteel Plate is very strong because it protects from board wipes that say destroy, and also indestructible, it just can't be destroyed. That's great. We need Xyris to stay out there, and this is a really good way of doing it. Also, Darksteel Plate itself is indestructible, so it's hard to get rid of this card. Heroic Intervention. This is especially good because at times we will have a massive board state, and if something were to interfere with that, like again a board wipe, or if somebody's playing something where they can pick off certain parts of our engine and they turn us off, no, we can say, don't do that, please. Here's Heroic Intervention. We're going to have Hexproof and Indestructible until the end of the turn. Lightning Greaves, I do want to mention something about this. When we have Cryptolith Ride out, and our snakes are coming into play, each of those snakes we can equip with Lightning Greaves for free and then tap them for 1 mana. So if they can't get rid of Lightning Greaves, that basically means all of the snakes that we have, if we have Cryptolith Ride out there, can now tap for mana, and we basically have as many mana as we do snakes, which is really dangerous for our opponents. Narset's Reversal. I think this is a fun counterspell. I put it in here. Maybe some people don't like to play it, but I like it in this deck. Negate, just another counterspell, and then Simic Charm. Simic Charm is good because if we want to pump Xyris so he does 3 more damage, we'll make 3 more snakes and draw 3 more cards. That's great. But it also gives permanents we control hexproof until the end of the turn. Return target creature to its owner's hand. I'm sure there will be times where we want to use that, but it's mostly in here for the first 2 options. So with all that out of the way, let's talk about all the ways that this deck is going to draw cards. Yes, you are seeing this correctly. That is 18 card draw spells. I'm serious. This deck is super consistent, and one of the reasons is because you can draw so many cards that you get all the pieces that you need, and it always is a fun deck to play. So, starting off, Dictate a Crufix. 3 mana enchantment. You can flash it in. Everybody's drawing an extra card. That's great. Every extra card means more snakes for us. Dragon Mage. 7 mana. When it deals combat damage to a player, each player discards their hand and draws 7 cards. Guess what? With Xyris out, we're making 21 snakes. That is a ton of snakes. And it's a 5/5 flyer. That's pretty good too. Fevered Visions. Everybody's drawing an extra card. If that player's your opponent and they have 4 or more cards in hand at the end of their turn, it deals 2 damage to them. It's not going to kill anybody, but it is nice. It does incremental damage, and we get to make snakes every time they draw from it with Xyris out there. Font of Mythos. 4 mana artifact. Everybody's drawing 2 extra cards. This was Xyris out there. We're drawing 2 extra cards on our turn, and guess what? Around the table, we made 6 snakes. Pretty good. Howling Mine. Everybody's drawing 1 card around the table. We're drawing a card, we're making 3 snakes every time around the table with Xyris out there. Again, very good. Hunter's Insight can be very good because when Xyris deals damage, he's dealing damage and we are drawing that many cards already. But if we want to draw even more cards and we want to be the only ones that are drawing those extra cards, we could play this out there and put even more cards in our hand. Jace's Archivist. Wheels. Again, wheels are great. And because this card says draws cards equal to the greatest number of cards a player discarded this way, that's huge. Because we at sometimes will have, I'm not even exaggerating, like 25 to 30 cards in our hand because we draw so many cards with this deck. So if everybody does that, guess what? 30 cards, we're making 90 snakes. 90. It's happened before. It does it consistently. Magus of the Wheel. Same type of thing, but everyone draws 7 cards. Still pretty good, that's 21 snakes. Mind's Aglow. So it's 1 mana, but it has joined forces. That basically means 1 mana X. Everybody can pay mana into this to draw more cards. So if you have this at the beginning of the game and you feel like people might be low on cards somehow, then you can play this and hope that other people play mana into it so that everyone gets to draw some cards. But if it's later in the game, we have a ton of snakes and they're able to tap for mana, then we can just dump a ton of mana into this and make everybody draw a lot of cards, throwing snakes onto the battlefield. Molten Psyche is another wheel type of effect, and then we also deal damage if we have enough artifacts. This card is just mainly in there for the wheeling effect. Seagate Restoration. This is one of those lands that can be a card if you need it to. 7 mana, draw cards equal to the number of cards in your hand plus 1. If we have something like Psychosis Crawler out here, or any other card that cares about the number of cards in our hand, that's crazy. But I do like that it gives us no maximum hand size for the rest of the game, because we very rarely will have less than 7 cards in our hand. So it's nice to have a maximum hand size increase. Skull Clamp. Our snakes are 1/1s. We could pay 1 mana and draw 2 cards. Seems pretty good. Teferi's Puzzle Box. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player puts all the cards from their hand on the bottom of their library in any order, then draws that many cards. So with Xyris out there, depending on how many cards everyone has in their hand, we're just making a snake on every person's turn because they have to draw for each card that's in their hand. Plus, this can disrupt players if they like what's in their hand, and they have to put that into the bottom of their library. So some people might be wasting their mana just to play things because they know they're not going to have it. So they won't be making plays as ideally as they normally would for them. Temple Bell is 3 mana, tap it, each player draws a card. That's nice, it's like Howling Mine. Vision Skeins is a 2 mana, each player draws 2 cards. It's good in the early game if you need more stuff in your hand, and it's good with Xyris out there because you draw 2 cards and make 6 snakes. Wheel of Misfortune. I'm excited to see how this plays. I am a little bit confused on what happens if everybody chooses 0. To me, it seems like that means nobody's drawing cards, which is bad for this deck. But at the same time, if somebody does want to draw cards, it's a wheel, and we like wheels in this deck because we want everyone drawing a lot of cards. Whirlpool Warrior is a 3 mana, 2/2 Merfolk. When it enters the battlefield, shuffle the cards from your hand into your library, then draw that many cards. That's fine, we're drawing cards. I guess if we have Psychosis Crawler out there or anything like that, that's good for us. But this is basically a 4 mana, sacrifice it, each player shuffles the cards from his or her hand into their library, then draws that many cards. So this is just another strong wheel effect to make the whole table draw a lot of cards, and we'll make a lot of snakes. And then Windfall is Jace's Archivist on a sorcery. We don't have to wait for time around the table so that we can play it. It's just 3 mana. Each player discards their hand, then draws cards equal to the greatest number of cards a player discarded this way. Again, we can have like 30 cards in our hand with this deck, so that is almost an instant win if we have Xyris out there. Okay, now we've hit that part of the video where we go from being the table's best friend to their worst enemy. These are the cards that are going to win you the game because you have so many snakes. Let's start off with Coat of Arms, 5 mana artifact. Each creature gets +1/+1 for each other creature on the battlefield that shares at least one creature type with it. Keep in mind this is a global effect, so if somebody's playing a zombie tribal deck and now you played this, all their zombies get +X/+X, where X is the number of zombies they have. But Xyris is a snake, so all the snakes that we make just make Xyris stronger. Not only is that commander damage, but as mentioned before, that's more cards that that the player that we're attacking is drawing and that we're drawing. So it's just great, and then all of our snakes can become massive. Goblin Bombardment. A lot of snakes. Maybe someone casts a board wipe, and we just want to throw these at someone so that we get some use out of them. Or maybe we have more snakes than our opponents do life, and we can just machine gun them down. Really strong card in the deck. Impact Tremors. Very good. Every time somebody's drawing extra cards with Xyris out there, we're making a snake, we're doing a damage. Wheeling effects, that could do 21 damage to a player, or each other player. It's a very good card, and if this doesn't get removed, you're in a good position. Psychosis Crawler, I mentioned this earlier. Each opponent's losing 1 life, every time that we draw a card, which is great. And then its power and toughness are equal to the number of cards in our hand. That's good. If it somehow is able to sneak through for damage, I can sometimes just kill someone right there. Perforos is just a much better impact tremors, and this, I will promise you, if your opponents don't get rid of this and you have Xyris out there, you're going to win the game. It's simple. There's 18 card draw spells in this deck. That means that you are going to be making a lot of snakes if this and Xyris are out there, and every time somebody is drawing an extra card, the whole table is taking 2 damage. That's nuts. This card is amazing in this deck. Shared Animosity. Very similar to Coat of Arms, except it's only when our creatures are attacking, but it's the same effect and it's very strong. Stoneforge Masterwork. Very similar to Coat of Arms and Shared Animosity, except we're going to be attaching this to Xyris so it's stronger and it does more damage, and we're making more snakes and we're drawing more cards. And then the last one is Teleportal. Maybe we have a lot of snakes, but we didn't find our Perforos, our Impact Tremors, or ways of doing damage when they come into play. Might as well just buff them up and swing them in for a kill, because now they're unblockable and each of them get +1, +0 until the end of the turn. Yes, I am aware. It is bad to give our opponents a ton of cards, because they're also going to find the things that they want. That's why we run some pretty good removal, and as mentioned before, we do have 4 counter spells in case they're going to play something that's really crazy. The first one is Artifact Mutation. Red and a green, destroy target artifact, it can't be regenerated. Create X/1/1 green Saproling creature tokens where X is that artifact's converted mana cost. Now the reason I like this in the deck is because we have stuff like Perforos, Impact Tremors, Goblin Bombardment, things that care about us having tokens come into play. That's just nice. So this is a good way of getting rid of an artifact. Chaos Warp is a very strong removal spell in red. We can get rid of any permanent, and then they basically reveal the top card of their library, and we hope that it's not as bad as the card we just removed. Hull Breach. Destroy an artifact, or destroy an enchantment, or destroy an artifact and an enchantment. Very good card. I like it in the deck. Imprisoned in the Moon can be obnoxious for your opponents, because you can enchant a creature, a land, or a planeswalker. That thing is now a colorless land that taps for a colorless and loses all card types and abilities. So this, if they don't have a way of removing an enchantment, then that thing that we enchanted with this is going to be stuck like this for the game, because it's very hard to get rid of lands, and if you can't get rid of this enchantment, then it's stuck, and this can be super obnoxious. Mizia Mortars. Maybe we're not the only person at the table going wide, and we want to clear up whatever tokens they're making. So being able to, for 6 mana, do 4 damage to all the creatures that we don't control is a very strong ability. Nevinyrral's Disc is great to have out there at the beginning of the game, because then we can hard commit to the board, and as soon as we feel like somebody might be progressing faster than us, we can just reset the board and start from scratch. We'll be drawing our cards, we have ramp spells, and we'll get back into the game very quickly. And then Whelming Wave. 4 mana sorcery. Return all creatures to their owner's hands except for Krakens, Leviathans, Octopi, I think that's supposed to be. Maybe I'm wrong. And then Serpents. So Xyris is a Leviathan. We get to keep him out there. Everything else will go back to our opponent's hands. I really like this card. It's actually worked for me a couple times where I get to keep Xyris and nobody else has any of those other creature types. So it's a very good card in the deck, and it's always nice to have board wipes in a deck where you're letting your opponents draw so many cards, because again, they're going to have gas in their hand too. And of course, we have the section of random good stuff. This time we have 8 cards in it, and we'll start off with Avenger Zendikar. As I mentioned with that artifact removal spell that makes tokens, we have other token synergies in the deck. So 7 mana for a 5/5 that when it enters, we create a plant token for each land we control is very good, because we do have a lot of ways of ramping in this deck and finding more lands. Plus, whenever a land comes into play, we buff up those plants. So this card can do work over the course of the game. Balaged Recovery is just, I got this card in a pack and I thought I'd throw it in a deck. Return target card from your graveyard to your hand. Maybe you wheeled something out that you want to use, or maybe you want to get one of your wheels back and use it again. If you don't want to use this card, have it be a land that taps for green. Body of Knowledge. Okay, so this card isn't great. I'll be honest with you. I removed a card that was less great, and now this is there, and it's a placeholder for something. I haven't found the right card yet for it, but it's Body of Knowledge, 5 mana, Star. Its power and toughness are equal to the number of cards in our hand. That's awesome. We're going to have a lot of cards in our hand. You have no maximum hand size. That's great. As I've mentioned before, we can often have way more than 7 cards, so it's great to be able to hold on to all of them. Whenever it is dealt damage, draw that many cards. So if you just leave this up, I wouldn't attack with this. I would leave this up, so if somebody does attack you, you can block with it, and you're drawing as many cards as you are blocking. So this can be good. We'll see how it works. I haven't actually got to play this in the deck yet. Court of Calling. Tutors are good. Perforos is a creature, so if you have enough snakes out there, you can just convoke it and go find Perforos and ensure that you have it out there. Also, we have, as I'm about to say, we have the Locust God and other creatures in our deck that we could want, so it's very nice to be at instant speed, be able to find something that you really need. Fires of Yavimaya. Haste is really important in this deck. I think that when I do take out Body of Knowledge, I'm going to put in another haste enabler, because when snakes are able to come in and tap for mana, like I said, with Cryptolith, right? And when Xyris is able to come in and attack on the same turn, that's big because it gets us going that much faster. So Fires of Yavimaya, 3 mana, all of our creatures are going to have haste, and then we can sacrifice it to buff our creatures +2/+2 until the end of the turn. So we can actually attack with all the creatures we just put in, and then in response to everything attacking, then we can sacrifice this and buff our board. It's a good card. Ogre Battle Driver. Whenever I play this, no one gets rid of it. And it's crazy because this thing puts in so much work over the game. It is a 4 mana 3/3. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, that creature gets +2/+0, gains haste until the end of the turn. So if we play this on turn 4, cast Xyris on turn 5, now Xyris is a 5/5 that comes in with haste. We're drawing 5 cards, we're making 5 snakes, and those snakes have haste if we have something to do with the snakes at the end of the turn. But this is a very strong card in the deck. The Locust God. I don't even know if I have to say that much about this, but I will because it's a really good card. 6 mana. It is flying. It's a 4/4. It is not an enchantment. If you've seen that video, it is not an enchantment. But it is a flying 4/4. Whenever you draw a card, put a 1/1 blue-red insect creature token with flying and haste onto the battlefield. This is basically another Xyris, except it cares about us drawing cards instead of our opponents. Very good. Whenever it dies, you get to put it back in your hand. So after you have this, unless someone exiles it, you're really not going to lose it unless you wheel it away or something crazy happens, because it's always going to come back to your hand. You can pay 4 mana to draw a card and discard a card. 98% of the time, we're always going to have a better option than that, but it's nice to have it there. And then the last card is Xenagos, God of Revels. I have a Xenagos deck. I will be doing a deck tech for that in the near future. But again, haste is important with the deck. It also is going to make our Xyris bigger when it comes into play. So for 5 mana, indestructible enchantment. As long as your devotion to red and green is less than 7, it's not a creature. That's fine. It's whatever. Beginning of combat on your turn, another target creature you control gains haste and +X, where X is that creature's power. And as we've seen already, Psychosis Crawler, Body of Knowledge, Xyris with the correct enchantments or equipment out there, those cards can get massive. So being able to double their power can be terrifying for our opponents. So that's the video. What did you think of the deck? This is one of my favorite decks because it's so consistent. Being able to draw this many cards, it has a lot of ramp. It almost always gets to do what you want it to do. You just have to make sure that your opponents don't stop you from doing it. I think that we're going to see a lot of these decks in the future when we get back into card shops, because this is a card that came out during this whole pandemic quarantine stuff. So when we get back into card shops, I expect to see a lot of decks that are similar to this, and I hope that you were a little bit warned about what it can do by this video. If you like what I'm doing, please like and subscribe. Anything you want to say, comment below, and I'll see you next time.